Is happening where you are, Janine? What can you tell us in terms of developments?
A very good welcome and morning to you, Desiree. I must say, I never thought that number crunching would be so exciting. I think we all hated mathematics at school, but when we look at numbers come election time, it takes on a whole different role. And I'm finding it fascinating as the numbers are coming in. Just over 38% actually of the votes in the Eastern Cape have been counted. But I will discuss that a little bit more. But quickly, I'm joined by the Provincial Police Commissioner here in the Eastern Cape, Liziwe Nchinga. Ma'am, how did your men and women in blue do yesterday? I know we had one or two problems in the province, but for the most part, things went very well.
Janine, I must confirm that men and women in blue in Eastern Cape, they were excellent yesterday. They did very well. Our plan was put in place for a long time. We studied the province. We went to all the places that we know that they were inaccessible. So we were all over the place. Our roving teams were placed strategically for any eventuality, just to calm down anything that can happen. So our men in blue, they really made us proud yesterday. But I want also to say the multidisciplinary task team comprised of all departments, JCPS cluster was also excellent because we were all hands-on. Anything that happens, we were able to direct the teams on the ground. So I can say that our plan was good. Even the incident of Ntabankulu, we were on top of the game because we managed to get there in time. The roads they were dark by the night, but in the morning we were there with our TLB to make sure that people want to go to vote, they were there.
Can I just interrupt you? Can you just explain perhaps to our viewers, no voting at all took place in Ntabankulu. The police were there, the protesters were there, and people who wanted to vote were there. How come was no voting allowed? What is the role of the police? To what extent do you intervene?
We were there as the police to make sure that those who want to vote must vote. But we had to assess the situation because the situation was beyond the normal thing because it was violent. But our role also is to protect people who want to vote and also the protesters. So after we've assessed the situation, we will find out that we cannot continue. So that people must be safe. Remember, it's our role to make sure that people are safe.
Commissioner, I'm going to let you go. I know you've got a meeting this morning. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you so much.
So now we're going to have a little chat about some of the numbers that are coming through in the Eastern Cape. The CSIR predictions are very, very interesting. I'm going to have a chat now to our resident analyst here in the Eastern Cape, Professor Jolene Steenkotze. Jolene, hello again.
Hi.
It's that time. Let's have a look at some of the predictions coming through. So we've got the ANC predicted by CSIR just over 69%. What is this saying?
You know, I think if you kind of track since 1994 with the birth of our democracy and you look 25 years later on the performance of the ANC in its heartland, this particular political party was sitting at around 84% in 1994, and 25 years later it's declined to just below 70%. But it's not such a significant decline if the prediction is correct, because in 2014 it was sitting at around 71% of the vote in the Eastern Cape. Similarly, I think with the DA, what we saw was quite a big jump in growth between 2009 and 2014, but the predicted outcome shows a marginal growth for the DA in the province as the official opposition.
Jolene, and are you not surprised, we spoke earlier, you're not surprised that the EFF in the province has leapfrogged the UDM into third place?
No, not really, because the UDM as well is a party that has been on decline for quite a number of years. It was the official opposition. It was ousted as official opposition by COPE, and it never managed to regain that ground. So I would be quite interested to see, one, how the UDM fares in the province, but also if they actually do manage to get representation within the National Assembly once the final results come out.
Now, we saw a lot of new smaller parties popping up to contest these elections, 26 in the Eastern Cape in total. Now, on the radar, I see that making a slight little appearance there is the ATM.
Yes, the predicted result for the ATM is 1.14, which again, it's all right. It's a political party that is new. I think the political party runs the risk of maybe just being more of a provincial presence as opposed to more of a national presence like the AIC we saw. But of course, we know there was some controversy around confusion between the ANC and the AIC in previous elections.
And on a national level, the Good Party is also stepping up. From a provincial perspective, what can we expect from Patricia de Lille's party in your expectation?
Well, she hasn't popped up yet. I think in all probability what we may see happen is that the Good Party makes an appearance in more urban areas, but I doubt that it would be in a position to have captured the rural vote in the Eastern Cape.
Jolene, now, counting's going pretty well in the Eastern Cape. We're just over 38%. What do you think voter turnout is going to be in the province? Because, you know, we had all those service delivery protests where people said, listen, we weren't going to go to the ballot box.
Currently, when I looked at the latest stat, the current voter turnout is at around 61%, and the CSIR's prediction of voter turnout in the Eastern Cape is at 58.62%. And that is quite significant, I think, because we have to remember in this province, voter turnout was normally in the 80s, and then it declined to around 71% in 2014. So you're looking at a drop of approximately 13% in voter turnout in the province if these predictions are correct.
Now, all with our 26 parties here in the province, do you think there's going to be any surprise package that everyone might be blindsided by?
Well, I think it's still early days in terms of the counting, and we also need to be wary of some of the uncomfortableness around the electoral process. So I think one is also going to have to see how that is going to play out during the course of the day in the province.
And before we go back to Pretoria, let's briefly talk about Irvin Jim's party, the Social Revolutionary Workers' Party. What sort of impact do you think they're going to have, particularly maybe Nelson Mandela Bay, although this is not a municipal election?
You know, I am very interested in tracking Irvin Jim's Socialist Revolutionary Workers' Party, predominantly because, again, it's a strong trade unionist background. We had the United Front in 2016, also with a strong union background. They didn't really make the splash I had expected. But I do think we may find in especially Buffalo City as well as Nelson Mandela Bay, your manufacturing hubs, so to speak, that this particular party could garner some support. But again, it could predominantly be urban, provincial type of entity.
Jolene, let's leave it at that. We'll be chatting to you later during the course of the day. We'll be updating you throughout the day as the numbers come in, but fascinating times and very, very interesting numbers. From us here in East London, it's back to you in Pretoria.
Janine, while we have you, I hope you're still there. Let's continue a bit with the number crunching, because even though the huge margin that the ANC is receiving in the Eastern Cape is said to be a decline from previous elections, if you look at the board, it's the only province where the ANC is way ahead of the party coming after it, which is the Democratic Alliance. But also the fortunes of the ATM party. Do we think that the leadership contestations that seemed to be taking place just on the eve of the elections could have damaged their chances?
You know what, Desra, I'm going to put that question straight to our analyst. She's probably way better qualified to answer that than I am. Jolene, they were asking, the Eastern Cape's the only province where the gap between the ANC and the next party, the DA, is basically at this stage the widest. But they've alluded to the ATM and some of the problems that they have and some of the allegations on the eve of the elections leading up to voting. Do you think that those allegations that were spoken about just prior to elections might be damaging for the ATM?
You know, it's a question of having to wait and see. We need to remember that the Eastern Cape is traditionally the heartland of the ANC. Rich liberation history. Many of our struggle heroes were born and bred here. So it's not surprising that we see that gap. In terms of the allegations, we have to wait and see how the ATM takes that forward. If there is any merit in some of the concerns and allegations, and of course evidence of that, I think is going to be key. If that does not exist, then it could potentially damage the ATM in future as well.
Speaking about the new parties, do you think with some of them that perhaps there may be coalition talks at some stage and we may have new bedfellows as partners going forward?
I think at this point in time, not necessarily at a provincial level, but I do think it is something to look at maybe more at a local government election, perhaps the next round. We've already seen that in Nelson Mandela Bay. We've seen the ANC decline in Buffalo City Municipality, so that would also open up the space within a local government context for potential coalitions, where smaller parties, of course, then become the proverbial kingmaker.
Well, we've seen that with the ARC in Nelson Mandela Bay as well as the Patriotic Alliance, so I think you're spot on with that. Desiree, I hope that Jolene's answered your question significantly and that it's a little clearer. As I say, I'm sure she knows more than I do at this stage when it comes to analysis. Desiree?
Thank you so much. Just to keep you up to date, 3,252,004 votes officially counted at this stage. The ANC standing at 55.07% of the vote, the DA at 25.96%, and the EFF at 8.28%.